Let's. Why is this not working? Right, people, welcome back to another episode with the Love More Football. Again, Arsenal versus PSG, a game that we are not going to forget in the longest. I think quite unfortunate for Arsenal. I think they had generated a decent number of chances, but you know they couldn't really get across the line. Bro, Kish, come in.
Yeah. No, listen, it was a good game. I think it was a good game in terms of at least on PSG's end. First couple minutes of the game, Arsenal obviously wanting to go to the final. They have nothing to play for the rest of the season other than the UEFA Champions League, right? They started off strongly, but PSG um grew into the game, and they were the better team all around. To be honest, Arsenal, I think they were dull in my opinion. And I'm quite happy that Arsenal would have lost, to be honest.
Yeah, they could have lost. For me, it was like a game where Arsenal, they started off pretty well. Like I wouldn't even say technically they were good. I think PSG were just caught off positions in the first 20-25 minutes. I think they were thumping in really well, and then they just derailed, man. I think they should have maintained that same momentum, but sort of, and they were trying a lot. I don't think Arsenal played bad. They were trying a lot, but there was a bit of a gap in terms of trying to gain that momentum again. If you have a consistent element of losing balls again and again, I think they got dispossessed too often. Like Merino, Party, even Party, man, Thomas Party. I saw him getting dispossessed back to back, and it was like they couldn't really get onto that same momentum, and it turned down to urgency towards the end when they conceded that penalty, and like Raya saved that. They got some sort of confidence from that, and then then we saw that it was mostly Arsenal trying to damage PSG's backline. But I still think the game was fair, the refereeing was fair, and yeah, the penalty decision was a bit unfair in my opinion. I think
I think that's
um,
a penalty.
you thought that was a penalty.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the thing is, when you're in the 18 and you have to be careful in terms of how you set your body as a defender, because at the end, he did kind of, I don't know if impede is the right word, right?
Yeah,
But in terms of how he would have set his body in that motion, it I think it's an infringement. That's how I see it. It's unfortunate, but that's the game of football. When I was growing up playing football, even if a shot was taken and you know you had no intention of putting your hand in the way, but just depending on your body position, right? It's a penalty. This thing
yeah,
where I think penalties are too debatable nowadays, right? And then again, it's kind of different because sometimes it can be subjective to the referee, right? And the whole VAR thing or whatever the case is. But I think it was a penalty. But with this Arsenal team, I think what got the better of Arsenal, or what they lacked in this game, was not having technical and quality players, right? That's how I see it. PSG, Bradley Barcola, who I think, Bradley Barcola is a very frustrating guy, to be honest, man. He should have put Arsenal to bed. From the first leg, he should have really and truly put Arsenal to bed, right? But having the likes of Bradley Barcola, Kvaratskhelia, Dewey, Vitinha, Fabián Ruiz, and those guys in the midfield, I felt as if they just had better players all around. And this is the thing, right? When you play against top quality opponents across Europe, like the Real Madrid, FC, Barcelona, these teams are stacked in terms of players that they have in each and every position, right? Where Arsenal, they don't have that across their front three. The midfield is good to an extent.
yeah.
But in terms of the front three is just basically Bukayo Saka. And before the game, I texted and I was saying, like, listen, imagine going into a semi-final where Mikel Merino is your striker, and you were saying, oh, the last couple of games he was scoring, but I said to you, like, Kai Havertz scores goals, but he's still bum. He's still not good enough. So whether or not Mikel Merino was scoring goals against some teams, like, it doesn't really matter. He's not a number 9. He's not going to be a huge threat for PSG. He doesn't offer that. He's not a Osimhen, he's not a Goikarez, he's not a Erling Haaland that's going into a big UEFA Champions League semi-final. He's not a Martinez from Inter Milan that caused problems for FC Barcelona yesterday. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I felt as if Arsenal just didn't have enough in terms of quality players to face this PSG team.
Yeah, that's one point. And then another is, I think, just going back to where you started off with Merino, I think Trossard looked like he could have been an option for me. I think technically Trossard is a better player for me than Merino. When he came on, I think he started triggering a couple of good transitions for Arsenal. I think Trossard should have been brought on a little earlier, if not starting the game. But also, like, I would like to lay a little emphasis on Martinelli's game. I think it was horrible. Like, initially, I think Martinelli was getting on the ball and then was supplying low crosses in the box. But then he wasn't able to beat his man, Hakimi. I think Hakimi was fantastic. He had a fantastic outing, won each and every grounded duel. And even the wingers, I have to attribute them for this. I think Barcola and Kavisha Kvaratskhelia, I think they did a tremendous job of backing their fullbacks up. The cover was always there. One thing which I really loved about PSG's game, barring that 25 minutes of hounding that they received in the first, I think even in those 25 minutes, I think they were defensively really sorted. I think Odegaard's shot was brilliant. I think that was one situation where PSG got lucky, the defense, but Donnarumma, man, stepping up big. And even Declan Rice, he had an opening header in the first couple of minutes and he got denied, and
Yeah.
I mean,
I think in the first 25 minutes, I agree with you in terms of like PSG, despite like being like hounded by Arsenal in terms of Arsenal being on top of them. I think PSG had enough players in the box. I mean, then again, they were being hounded, so they had no other option rather than to be in the box. You know what I'm saying, to defend. But I
yeah,
think in terms of the shape that they kept, I think it was good. It was more so not having. Well, they had the outlet. They've always had the outlet to play out from the back and then go on the attack, right? And we see
yeah,
how dangerous they were on the counter attack when they started to grow into the game with Barcola and those guys, right?
yeah,
But again, I agree with that. I agree that the defensive shape of PSG, it was good. And most of all, in that 20 to 25 minute span, it was mostly corners that Arsenal would have been picking up. You know what I'm saying?
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're right. So it was mostly set pieces, and I think PSG suck at set pieces, right? I mean, aerially they suck. Barring Pacho, I think even Pacho, to be honest, I don't think he's that good aerially. But then Arsenal had enough touches on those set pieces, and it was just the final. The ball into the box could have been better for me. I think a couple of opportunities coming in from Martinelli's side. I think there was one opportunity where he maneuvered around Hakimi really well. He lobbed that ball to Saka, but you see, it was like a mismatch, in those sequences. And for me, if you really want to expose this PSG, you got to be breaking them really quick. And that's where I think Arsenal really lost the game for me. In the second half, they were really quick with those transitions, but I think it was a little too late. And Saka had an open opportunity, but the ball that he received, I think the pace on the ball was too quick for him to actually put it to bed. So he
yeah,
skied
and
it.
you know, Arsenal really and truly gave themselves a disadvantage in terms of not taking that home game seriously. Well, they did take it seriously, but not taking a draw from home, bringing it to France. I felt as if even in the second half when Arsenal tried to get back in the game after that like penalty save with David Raya, I just felt like the atmosphere wasn't there for Arsenal. It didn't feel like a big European night where Arsenal could have done something. Like
Yeah,
the atmosphere was not there for them. The away support, it wasn't really there. PSG all around, they were the better team. You know what I'm saying? And again,
true.
having a manager like Luis Enrique, I said to people, Barcelona and PSG, one of those teams get into the final or winning the Champions League comes down to the manager, whether it's Hansi Flick or Luis Enrique, and that's down to the brilliance that they've shown across Europe. Hansi Flick won the Champions League, I believe, at one point in time, and Luis Enrique also won the Champions League when he won the treble with Barcelona, and he has always been a brilliant
Correct.
manager, and he has shown that without a team with Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe, he has gelled, or it's a well-oiled team, and that's down to Luis Enrique and no one else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But Arsenal,
Hansi
for me,
Flick's Hansi Flick's Bayern actually beat this PSG team,
yeah,
and
exactly.
it happened 5 years ago when they got the treble that season. But you're absolutely bang on. I think PSG were more well rounded, and I think there was a sense of calm as well. As good as they were defensively, I think Marquinhos, man, was brilliant with the interceptions, stepping off the back line, getting on a high line, and supporting Vitinha and Joao Neves in those situations. But but I still felt like Arsenal could have actually taken the game. They could have towards the end because the momentum was with Arsenal mostly.
Oh yeah, if Saka had scored from that chance, then maybe we would have seen a different ending where they would have brought it into extra time, right? But
Yeah,
then again, you ask yourself the question: would they have enough in the tank in extra time to actually see it out or get a result that would favor them going to the final, right? I'm not so sure.
yeah. Like even I think they broke their momentum early on because of Nuno Mendes too. I think he had three sloppy passes, looked a little sluggish at times to me. But after those 25 minutes, I think Nuno Mendes finished the game on a really good high. But he's been defensively found out too. Like the narrative was that Nuno Mendes is a world class fullback, but this season he's been a little lackluster. Um, and even Fabián Ruiz, I don't think he did anything wrong. But then in terms of providing cover, I think Joao Neves takes a lot of onus, right, to help them defensively. But Fabián Ruiz and Vitinha, I felt as good as they were going forward, I think defensively they could have still supported them a tad bit more. I think Kavisha actually saved the game for them. Like if it was like a Garnacho-esque sort of a performance, just lurking ahead and not helping them defensively, I think they would have hit a rut. And for them to actually not convert more opportunities, I think PSG had a couple of opportunities too. I think Kavisha hit the woodwork once in the opening sequences, and you had a Barcola with so many opportunities. You had a Doué in those 25 minutes. You had a Desiree Doué, going on those transitions, controlling the ball, and lurking around their final third. But again, he lacked that power to
Yeah, do
nullify
it.
the
Yeah,
threat.
when he had the ball on those transitions, right? He
Yeah,
got in front of the Arsenal defense, but when it came to making that final decision of the pass, he did make the pass, but he just felt as if like PSG at that time they were lacking something on that final ball whenever they were in the final third, right? And
yeah,
you know, they didn't really capitalize at that point in time. And Bradley Barcola, I felt as if across the game he had multiple opportunities to really punish this Arsenal team, and he should have punished
true.
them in the first game at the Emirates. But he needs to work on his. I don't know if it's the finishing or I think it's more so the decision making from
Yeah,
Barcola.
I think it's the composure. I think he has those nerves around the final third. But Bukayo Saka, man, as threatening as he looked, I just thought he could have done a tad bit more before the goal. Like he could have actually, he had a couple of chances. He should have put them to bed. But again, not a very complete performance in terms of the creation. I think Arsenal lacked that. Only on set pieces, they looked really threatening. And in my opinion, if you have a cat and dog chase sort of a situation where Arsenal are literally the cats and they've actually conceded 2 goals, I think you've lost the game there mostly. And that's what really happened. Arsenal fans are fuming, of course, and they're not really happy about the result and they're pretty upset about it. But at the same time, Arteta mentioned this in the presser, right, in the post-match press conference that Arsenal were the better side first, and he says that Arsenal were the only side that were like that could be counted amongst the elites in this competition in this season of the Champions League, which was baffling to me. To be honest, I don't really agree with that. I think Arsenal played a pretty average game in both these legs against Real
I mean,
Madrid. Yeah,
there's no way he could think that Arsenal um was the better team in two legs, right? There's no way you could think that. And Mikel Arteta is known to be an asshole, and I think that's what he's doing. I think he's deflecting, taking away attention from his team. Which I mean, if people want to say that's being a good manager, fair enough. But I think he's putting himself out there as being stupid and finishing trophyless once again in that first leg at the Emirates. PSG, they were far the better team, and they had chances to make that game 4. They had chances to make that game 4-0, and they could have walked away easily with 3-4 goals at the Emirates. You know what I'm saying? Kvaratskhelia had a wonderful game. Dembele had a wonderful game. Barcola had a chance as well in the last couple of minutes to make it 2-0. So
yeah,
PSG all around in that game, they were the better team. And we all know that Declan Rice in that game also didn't have a good game. Thomas Partey wasn't there. So Declan Rice had an average game, etc., etc. Martin Odegaard also had a poor game as well. So there's no way he could have. Well, obviously he's thinking that they were the better team over two legs, but that's just been delusional.
yeah. I agree with that. I think that's just a bit too much to put out there. Plus, he was a little emotional about it too. Of course, I think the only manager for Arsenal who's actually again taking them to the semis and just got knocked out right in their very recent history. I think That's where he actually missed the mark. And I think Arsenal, this is what I believe in. This is what I've seen too. I think the consistency towards the business end of the season where you need those results, they lack that. And
Yeah.
you need a manager who's actually going to get you across the line. You know what? Kudos to him. You know, the credit has to be given to him for uplifting them from being a mid table performer to come in the top four of the Premier League, right? And he's done it consistently, but at the same time, he's not getting those trophies. And I think next season is the only time he gets to actually prove everyone wrong once again. And even Arsenal fans, I think they're quite level headed about the fact that they might need a manager change next season if it doesn't happen for them. I mean, how long are you going to wait for a trophy? You're not just going to be like hovering around the second position. You have plenty of managers who are proven in the Bundesliga, in Syria. Look at Inzaghi, man. His second finale in
And
preseason. Second finale. Yeah.
to be honest, like as an outsider looking in, I think the problem it's not so much about not winning the Premier League for Arsenal. It's more so the lack of trophies in general. You know what I'm saying? The FA Cup, the Carabao Cup. Those two cup trophies domestically, they've not like had a good showing in those competitions. You know what I'm saying? You look at United, for example. They're on track to head to a Europa League final. They won the FA Cup last season, and before that, they won the Carabao Cup as well. You have Newcastle winning the Carabao Cup. You have Liverpool that won the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup last season, right? Yeah, even had Leicester City at one point a couple years ago, finishing fifth in the Premier League, winning the FA Cup, right? So these things, in terms of the domestic competitions, they have a poor track record in those competitions as well. Newcastle United beating them this season in the Carabao Cup, United knocking them out of the FA Cup. And these things, it's almost criminal and Mikel Arteta's track record, especially with United beating them,
Yeah.
United. But again, I've always said United, they always find a way to beat teams whenever they feel like. So yeah. So
Yeah.
even next season, Arsenal fans always talk about, oh, who's going to replace Mikel Arteta, whatever the case is. I mean, really and truly, it's not for us to decide. But what we're trying to say is that like you do have managers out there. You know what I'm saying? You had Arne Slot who came in, and despite people thinking, oh yes, he had a Liverpool team that was already built, bro.
Right.
No one thought Liverpool was ever going to challenge for the Prem. Or even
Exactly.
if that was the case, maybe it would have been for like a 2 to 3 month span and then they would have fallen off, right? And,
Yeah.
we've seen
And
managers in the Prem, they've won the Prem in their first season, right?
yeah.
But to be fair, I think those are more exceptional managers than even an Arne Slot. And I think those teams that they also won those Premier League titles with, I think those teams were built at that point in time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where yes, this Liverpool team was built. Yes, it was built, but they also came off a season where they kind of at the last minute, at the last hurdle, they fell off, and then a whole manager change with Jurgen Klopp being there for how many seasons. You'd have thought to yourself that this would have affected Liverpool massively. You know,
Yeah. But also, like, there's another fact to this. I think the reason why no one expected Liverpool to actually get across, like you mentioned, I don't think the squad was good enough. I think the squad has aged and I think they have saturated in a way. I think which is why Trent stopped enjoying his time with Liverpool, in a way. And he wanted more, some fierce competition too. Not that Liverpool haven't really delivered, they have delivered and they've performed to the best of levels in the first half of the season. But this is what I mean. It's a culmination of the talent that you have in the squad, right? Ageism is not a myth. It exists in football for sure, right? And that's where I think Liverpool really could have gone down. And we were part of a panel like in the last podcast where we had an Arsenal fan pointing out to the fact that this Liverpool have to be the worst champions ever, right, to lift the Premier League in the last 1 decade, which was really disrespectful in a way because you need to understand Liverpool won the title because they were good, better than the rest of the 19 clubs. And it's just the league is not made up of Arsenal or City. You had Chelsea, you had Tottenham, you had United. Everyone could not prove that mark, right? It was just onslaught as a debutant. He was able to take them across the line and he delivered, right? That's what matters, right? So it's just people have a habit of being a little too salty about things, and that's where it all ends down the drain. But just let's just focus back into this fixture. Like we mentioned about the penalty shout, I think you can clearly see that MLS's arm is extended here, right? And I get it. Like the reaction time was too slow because Hakimi obviously must be like 2-3 yards away from him, and he took a brilliant shot. But still, that was it looks like a penalty for sure, right? His arm is extended. I think that's why the ref gave it. I think the benefit of doubt goes to PSG for that because of that. But again, it's a harsh call in my opinion too. Like, it so on good days, Arsenal could have gotten away with it, but I have seen teams getting away with it too often, right?
The
Like
question
80% of
should be
decisions don't really go in opposing teams' favor. So I think Arsenal, it was a harsh call for me.
the
That's what it
question
is.
should be: is Maslow Skelly a liability to Arsenal? You know, he has had good games this season, no doubt, but he has also been at the end of huge issues that would have affected Arsenal. You know what I'm saying? To some
Yeah,
extent, he has been a liability, and you know, maybe some people would put it down to inexperience. I think that would be fair. You know, him being 18, his first season in men's professional football. So I'm not going to be too harsh on Maslow Skelly, but it's more of a question that anyone can answer. You know what I'm saying? And even if he has been a liability this season to an extent, I don't think it's a bad thing because he's young, he's inexperienced. You know what I'm saying? But you know, such is life in terms of being a young player and you know breaking through to the first team. But he's definitely a quality player, right? And
yeah,
you know, yeah, you have a lot of people that share the sentiment that it was a harsh penalty, but that's just the game of football, to be honest.
agreed. Yeah, let's just address a couple of comments which came in on the Athletic. I think Athletic is one of the most credible journals out there, like in the world. So thought we played really well, came out flying. First 10 minutes, PSG looked overwhelmed. Ultimately, this tie, similarly to the Bayern games last year, was decided on moments of attacking class. The XG for these two games says it all, really. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously like PSG were better than them in the attacking department, and they got across them, right? So I think they delivered. And when it comes to technical ability and finishing ability, I think more or the less, I think PSG were definitely ahead of them, right? You can't deny that.
No, definitely. And you know, as I said, I believe that even if Arsenal had the likes of what's his name, Kai Havertz and those guys, you know, maybe with Havertz being like one of those like target men to an extent, you know, being able to provide hold up play, maybe they would have been a bit better, but I don't think it would have even made a huge difference. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah,
I think we can all agree that in the first 10 to 25 minutes, we saw the intent by Arsenal, we saw the intensity. They wanted to really get back into this game as quickly as possible, but it didn't really happen. And you know, you kind of have to feel sorry for Martin Odegaard as well because that was a brilliant shot. Like that came flying through the crowd, and Donnarumma went down quickly, and he got a hand to it. And you know, being 6'8" around that height, you have that height advantage with that reach as well, that wingspan. So you always have that advantage as a goalkeeper like Donnarumma. You know what I'm saying? Compared to other goalkeepers in the world. But it was a brilliant save and it was a brilliant shot by Martin Odegaard. But I have a question for you, right? In terms of being a captain, you think Martin Odegaard did enough today to push this Arsenal team forward?
I think in the first 2025, yes, but then, and even though I felt that Odegaard was um, decent, I wouldn't say he was good. I think he was decent, but again, like that flair that we see from him consistently was lacking, barring that one shot he created. I didn't see Odegaard being a supportive element in their attacking transitions in the second half. In fact, it was all being run by the flanks, right? And I think it's more of a tactical nuance. I think Declan Rice has been given that responsibility to barge ahead, but I don't think he was the difference maker tonight. I think Marquinhos again nullified their threat altogether. You know, even Pacho was really good for that one, and Hakimi, man, like we need to talk about him too, right? We've already spoken about him, but then the balance that he brought defensively to the game, I think it calmed their nerves a lot, which is why they were able to generate that level of momentum in the rest of the game. You know, that's where, for me, Hakimi, um, Due, and Kavisha were the difference makers, and even Joao Neves had a good game. I felt. I think he was really well rounded in totality, right? But let's
Yeah,
just move on to other
definitely.
comments. Yep.
And I've been impressed by Hakimi as well.
Hakimi was massive tonight. He was good. I mean, see, it comes down to, they say that the defense is the best form of attack, and it really comes down to that. But tonight it was all about defense. You know, if you have a good defense, I think you're it was safe to say that PSG sailed the right ship, right? defensively sound and attacking. They weren't really as good as what they should have been, but still, I mean, they generated some amount of chances and they were more clinical than Arsenal for sure. A lot of criticism against Odegaard for his clear drop in form this season. That's totally fair, especially when considering his turnover ratio and slow decision making. Still, imagine how much more effective Odegaard would be if he had a striker and left winger that could provide attacking threats. The spaces it would create, the load it would remove of him, and Saka being the only conduits of creative play in our front line. Rice surges the ball forward for us, but we expect Odegaard to create chances on a platter every single game. That's what my point was exactly. I think they've changed this, right? Odegaard can still do the same thing, but I don't think Arteta wants him to do that. I think, in fact, Arteta wants Rice to surge ahead. But if you look at teams like Crystal Palace, it's frontline, and frontline does not need a midfield like Odegaard having to thread the needle or tee things up perfectly every single game. They have forwards that can produce those threats from thin air. Arsenal need this badly, and I agree. I think um, no matter how harsh this sounds, I still feel like Odegaard does seem like a misfit that time. I think you can do with another midfielder. I don't think he brings in anything special to this game anymore. What do you think?
Yeah, when you talk about like being creative, right? You look at the likes of KDB, you look at the likes of Morgan Gibbs White, even look at the likes of Jack Grealish back then when he was at Aston Villa, where the responsibility was on him to find those spaces in behind, but not only find the spaces in behind, like having that technical ability to thread that ball in behind, to find those key passes to players from some tight angles. You know what I'm saying? The Bruno Fernandes, they've done that, or they continuously do it. KDB, he continuously does it. A couple seasons ago, he was really at the top of his game doing that, finding those impossible passes. And when you look at Martin Odegaard, it seems as if he's just a midfielder taking touches off the ball to play it safe in those wide areas to the likes of Gabriel Martinelli and Saka, in terms of being on top of the 18 and, coming across, being shifty, finding passes in tight angles or in those half spaces. He's just not doing it. You know what I'm saying? And it's either it's down to the instructions of Mikel Arteta or he's just not that type of player. You know what I'm saying? And there's not much creativity within this Arsenal midfield. You talk about Thomas Partey. I think he's good in terms of playing those long passes from deep. He's very accurate with his passes. I think Declan Rice is good in terms of progressing the football, moving forward. He's very strong. He's also good defensively as well in terms of his ball recoveries. But when you think about Martin Odegaard, there's nothing there that is of any significance. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Exactly.
Nothing
I
there.
feel the same,
Defensively,
man.
nothing. Attacking wise, nothing.
I don't
You know.
think he's important. I think they can do without him. I think if you bring in like a good shout for Morgan Gibbs White, if you bring in a ferocious midfielder who can actually play box to box and who can actually give you that energy when needed, who's not afraid to like provide those passes, not afraid to take risks, I think Odegaard would not be missed in this squad anymore. I think, in fact, they've gotten used to playing with an average Odegaard in this squad, right?
Yeah.
So I think
And
better midfielder. There are better midfielders out there for sure. I don't think he's even
one
even in
thing he
that world
doesn't
class
do,
category.
that's frustrating. He doesn't shoot. You
Yeah,
know, he doesn't shoot. The Kevin De Bruyne, he shoots. Bruno Fernandes, he shoots. You know what I'm saying? And they know how to ride a challenge as well. It doesn't seem like Martin Odegaard is ready to get himself in a scuffle in terms of like riding a challenge, like trying to get past a player. You know what I'm saying? I was watching Lamine Yamal yesterday against Inter Milan, and despite him not being a midfield player, but being one of those important players for Barcelona, he was willing to try to get past players, even if it meant even if it meant them fouling him. He's willing to take that on. You know what I'm saying? He's willing
yeah,
to try to have that physicality against him because the only way that you're going to get to put a quality cross into the box or get to beat a defender and then shoot is by actually having the intent to get past them. And Martin Odegaard, for me, being the captain, I think he should have been. I think a lot of responsibility. He didn't show enough responsibility for me as a captain in that game against PSG, where like give me the ball, like let me create something. You know,
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I, and as a captain, you have to show that. You know what I'm saying? You look at Bruno Fernandes, he does that. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
It might not work all the time, but like he's trying.
You know what? If Arsenal would have finished their chances off, I think they could have won the game easily. I think the momentum would have been with them, even though it was with them. But it's all about finishing your chances, right? I mean, overall, round of play and everything, if you actually see in culmination, I don't think yeah, Arsenal were better. Like people, even these comments are addressing that. No shame in that. Really, the team played really well. One bit of bad luck with the first goal and bit of sloppy defending in the second. World class saves by Donnarumma. Right. Overall, I think we were definitely the better team on the night. Just cannot find the net often enough. Need a really good striker. I agree. I mean, if they had better talent in those positions, like not a Merino, not a Trossard, you know, if you had fulfilled um, people in those positions, I think they would have actually won the game tonight. Honestly, I think PSG were not. They gave them a couple of opportunities to score, so I mean they could have actually gotten away with it. And in fact,
And
they hit a state of equilibrium. I think it wasn't really like PSG were domineering or they were too clean with everything. No, I don't think so. But yeah, I think they achieved a state of equilibrium is what it is.
yeah, I think they were safe. I think they were decent. But in those moments, like they obviously made Arsenal pay. You know what I'm saying? And if they can just finish, if they can just work on like some of the final touches in there in the final third, then they're gonna like be a bit more dangerous against teams, right? And it's not only about the save from Donnarumma and the Martin Odegaard one. He did save a couple big chances from, or a couple big shots from Saka as well. Top corner, he made a
Yeah,
save coming across. That was a brilliant one as well. So all around, he had a wonderful performance. And I feel like it's also disrespectful when people come on social media and their assessment is that, oh, Donnarumma saved PSG, as if like he's this outlier within the team, as if he's this alien figure. No, he's also a part of the team. He's the goalkeeper. You know what I'm saying? So it
yeah,
reminds me of when like, oh, United would have had David De Gea, and people would be like, oh, David De Gea saved you guys. I mean, no shit, Sherlock. Like, he's part of the team. He's supposed to save us. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we're not good attacking wise or defensively, then the last person that you can depend on is your goalkeeper. And if he's gonna have a fantastic game and keep shots out of the goal, then hell yeah, fantastic. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah.
again, PSG just a better team. I don't think Arsenal could have done anything differently other than finishing their chances and then riding with that momentum. If Saka had scored that one, then I think the last couple, like maybe 10, 5 minutes would have been a bit more interesting, because at that point in time when he missed that chance, it was like what, 75 minutes, 81 minutes in the game. So yeah, and I guess what, no remontada for this Arsenal team.
That's correct. That is correct. I feel that the season will be a missed opportunity when you look at the Prem. Plenty of teams who will retool. I think Berta will bring in what we need, but I do trust that Mikel Arteta won't rinse and repeat his management again next season. I'm not so sure. Think it's fair to say that these next three games can't come soon enough, and let's get these players on holiday as sap. Yeah, I think obviously I don't think if Arteta is still there, I think he's not really going to make those same mistakes he did. But then I think he's getting a golden opportunity to lead this team yet again. I don't think many other managers would have this opportunity. In fact, they would get the sack if they go wrong with it. First splurge of players that they've brought in the transfer
Yeah,
window, 600 million plus 700 million. In fact, is a lot to like just rebuild something. And then if this is what it comes down to, I mean, you need a trophy
and to be
yeah.
honest, man, like spending that much money, the most alarming thing with Arteta is that he's taking leftovers from other teams, right? Zinchenko, Kai Havertz, Gabriel Jesus, Raheem Sterling, those four players in particular. You know what I'm saying? And out of those four, you have Jesus, who at one point was a starter, and
Yeah,
then he brought Kai Havertz that he played in the midfield, didn't work out, and then he played as a striker. Yes, he scores goals, but he's still not good enough. You know what I'm saying? And on the
yeah,
stream a couple days ago, I was saying, listen, he has spent that much money, and since he would have let go of Lacazette and Aubameyang, he has failed to replace them. The only player he would have used to replace those two players in particular would have been Gabriel Jesus, in which we knew he wasn't good enough. And I don't think it's a problem with Gabriel Jesus being there. I think as a body, he is a squad player. I think he can also be a starter at some point in time as well. But he's not going to be the guy to lead you and to bring you to the promised land in terms of winning the Premier. You know what I'm saying? So in a
yeah,
sense, he has essentially failed to bring in a striker to some extent that is world class or that can provide the goods. You know what I'm saying? So yes, he has spent 700 million. He has made some brilliant signings as well. But he can't just keep going around taking up the rejects from some of these big teams. Liverpool ain't going to pick up a United reject, or a player that was not good enough for United. City ain't gonna go to United or Liverpool and pick up certain players. You know what I'm saying? They go for their guys on a clean slate, and if they fail, they fail. If they work out, they work out. Fantastic, you know. But you don't go and pick
Yeah.
up players from teams that they were like second fiddle, and then expect to come into your team as a starter to get you to the promised land. It's not gonna work.
Yeah. Plus, I'm sick and tired of reading these comments where you're like speculating that if someone's going to be brilliant, what you did in today's game doesn't reflect that. Like if you get good players in those positions, I mean, this guy is talking about getting a top class number 9. Of course, you would have had a good game today for sure if you actually had the players to play with. But then you can't really get away with statements like Arsenal, this team was top notch in the Champions League. Like that level of confidence turns into delusion when you're not able to deliver those results. And that's why Arsenal fans receive so much hate nowadays because of the chest that they show, um, despite knowing that they don't really have the players to back that quality up, right?
Yeah. True. You know, somebody made a comment about Berta and the athletic thing, and listen, if he gets a number 9 next season, then they have to win a trophy. And even if it's a FA Cup, I think that's still not good enough. Um, and listen, again, you know, you have managers out there, the Inzaghi. And let me ask you this question: isn't Mikel Arteta one of the most highest paid managers in the world as well?
He is one of the highest paid in the Prem for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think he's already signed another contract, so I think
I
of
think he
course
might be the
that
highest
makes
paid
him
in the Prem, if I'm not mistaken.
correct. Amorim? No, not Amorim.
Nah, man.
No,
To me, it would be out of him
I
and
think
Pep.
it has to be Pep. And then I think even Slot owns quite a bit, but then he's head coach. He's not yet a manager. So I think Mikel Arteta is really up above the rest of them. Let me check his wages. I think we'll get
Yes,
how
definitely
much
up
he
there.
earns.
And he's up there in Europe as well, you know. So when you have this type of thing, you know, I think there's one guy I believe that could come to Arsenal and win them a major trophy, the Premier League, and it would be Simeone from Madrid.
Yeah, bro.
I think he could come to the Premier and add something different that would listen, as defensive as he is, he can score goals. His team can score goals. You know what I'm saying? Um, but I
You know
think
it's Pep and then it's Arteta. So Pep is paid 400 grand a week, I think. No. It's 20.7 million an annum, and then you have 15.6 for Mikel Arteta, and that accounts for you to get a trophy. Like if
yeah,
you're paid that much, you're expected to give the results. But I mean, let's just get back to a couple of comments. The threadbare squad have completely over delivered. The idea that we were thankful Marino was starting at the 9 and Party back as one of our best players is ludicrous, but it also gives us hope that is absolutely gutting. PSG had full and rested squad. See, excuses after excuses, and I'm sure this guy is South Asian, just like I am. Yeah, because I mean it's terrible. Like I'm getting to hear a lot from the Indian gooners that they just come up with excuses of the most terrible sort. It's just embarrassing to be honest. And I, in fact, I have more Arsenal friends than any other clubs, and some of them are level-headed. They don't even rate Mikel Arteta anymore as a manager. But then I get it; he got you across the line, bro. But these excuses are terrible because literally you were taming yourselves as favorites of this competition once you entered the semifinals. Like it's actually ludicrous.
but there's one thing that we can't leave out as well. Other than the free kicks as well, I mean the corner kicks, the amount of throw-ins Arsenal had as well,
Oh
that they
yeah.
were so dependent on those throw-ins from Thomas Partey. Like you'd have swear was like was who was the famous guy in the Prem that normally had those long throws? Was it Delap?
No, in the Prem, like Stoke City had a player who
Yeah,
used
Stoke.
to. Stoke City did it in the 2008-2009 season. They had 13 long throws. They converted 8 out of that. Yeah, so they had quite a feat with that. Even Bournemouth, Brentford, in the last couple of seasons, they've had around 13, 14 long throw-in opportunities, and they've scored the most from that. So they've done quite well. Um, yeah, but overall, I still think like no matter what, like excuses is one thing and the performance is another. Like Arteta could have gotten away with it if he had better strikers. But then I'm not really judging him on the basis of what he's done tonight. I think the manager obviously will have to take some blame for what has happened, but they had enough scoring opportunities. So I think he set the squad to the best of their levels. I
But
mean,
the thing
that's,
is,
yeah,
whilst having enough scoring opportunities, do you have the players to convert those opportunities? You know what I'm saying? Because
exactly.
you look at Luton, for example. I've seen Luton in the Prem where they created enough opportunities to score against
They did.
teams,
By the
but
way,
they just
Luton are
didn't
getting
have the
relegated now from even the championship. They're going
yeah.
to Division One.
So what I'm trying to say is like you watch a lot of these smaller teams, right? Where they create chances in moments, right? They probably have 6 moments across 90 minutes. But do they have the quality players in those moments to convert from those chances? You know what I'm saying? The chances are quality, but is the finishing quality? Two different things, In the
Yeah.
moment, the chance that you're creating is quality because you're probably 1v1 with a goalkeeper, or you probably have 3v2, three of your players versus two defenders and then the goalkeeper, right? And then do you have a player to make that final pass that is quality for then that player to finish with a quality finish? No. So did Arsenal have the players like today to finish from those quality opportunities that they would have made? Maybe
Well,
not.
if they can do it against Real Madrid with this set of players, you're expected to do the same
But then
against
again, I've
PSG,
always
right?
said like, bro, like that Real Madrid shit is bullshit to me. Like it was just two brilliant free kicks, and that was it. You know what I'm saying? And yes, they
Yeah.
did score 2 goals in Real Madrid, but bro, one of them was in the last minute of the game. Like they hit Madrid overcome it, and not to take away anything from them, but still, I think the shocker was those 2 free kicks from Declan Rice at the Emirates, and Madrid just couldn't respond. You know what I'm saying? So that's
Yeah.
like a fluke to me, with all respect, to be honest.
But I'll tell you one more thing. I think Gabriel Magalhaes could have been the game changer for them. I think they really missed him too on the pitch. I think his influence on the pitch, I think he's one of the best centre backs in the Premier League for sure, given his consistency in the last 2 seasons. I think Saliba's, in fact, just he looks torrid to me. In fact, I think it's just the nerves that get to him. He had 3 blunders tonight too. I think PSG could have actually converted 2 opportunities from those blunders. The first coming in the first half, and there was another in the second half. He just gave the ball away too
I
easily.
think what Gabriel offers is the thing of that aggressiveness, right?
Yeah, he
He
does.
has that like assertiveness about him where he's willing to step, he's willing to get physical with attacking players. You know what I'm saying? Where
Yeah,
Saliba is like the Virgil van Dijk to an extent. But I don't think he has that aggressive nature to him. You know what I'm saying? I think he does it in a calm way, but
yeah,
sometimes you need to like really be assertive and aggressive and get to that ball, or like get a tackling, not get a tackling to like get a yellow card or whatever the case is, But we can see how Gabriel plays, where he's a bit more assertive, aggressive, and there's more intent in terms of how he defends.
yeah. But I still have to say this. I think Saliba, at least offensively for me, he was getting the job done. He had a couple of good scintillating passes. In fact, he had 8 passes into the final third tonight, like which speaks volumes. But again, that's what a defender can do at max, right? You're not expected to be a Fabian Shaw and score those starter goals from like 40 yards out. He can't do that. But at the same time, he was horrible in defense. I felt like, and 3 mistakes is enough for me to judge a player at this stage of the Champions League. I think you're supposed to show up with a neat performance, and which is why I mean, creating an assessment on a defender and calling him world class, like on the basis of 2 seasons, is not enough, bro. We didn't even do that for Van Dyke. Van Dyke got that tag after like 3-4 seasons, right? And Saliba, I think he's had a torrid season, to be honest.
But the
Like
thing
he's
is,
been
I mean,
making,
if
yeah,
you're playing to a world class level for at least 2 seasons consistently, I think you can be deemed as world class. You know what I'm saying?
a world class talent for sure. But then you need to replicate those performances on the pitch. You're expected to show up. This is the best he could have actually done. He had this opportunity.
Yeah, but to be honest, one bad season for me doesn't not make a player world class. If he was world
I
class
get a
before.
point, but then world class players do get trophies too. Are you telling
Yeah,
me
but the
that
thing is, as
Saliba?
a defender, you're not in a position to score goals. You're not the difference maker in terms of what your attacking players are doing in the front three. You know what I'm saying? What's the
Yeah.
saying? Attack win games, defense win championships.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good rebuttal for sure. And I totally agree with the fact that defenders are not expected to score goals. But for me, I would rather wait for another season or two and see if he's actually going to give us that same level of consistency which Gabriel Magalhaes has lived up to. In fact, I think I would rather call him a world class defender, bro, because how the performances that he's given in, they've been majestic, right? For Saliba, I think you're right. He does show traces of being world class, but bro, defensively, I mean, there were times tonight I wasn't convinced. In fact, PSG could have scored more goals easily. Like, this is my rebuttal to what Arsenal fans are saying, that we could have come up with a better performance tonight. No, man. I think PSG missed a penalty, right? They missed a couple of opportunities with Kabisha, with Barcola, with Due. They had plenty too. It could have been even Steven, to be honest. So let's just not write them off. Like they were definitely up there and they deserve to go across. Yeah.
Yeah, Vitinha for me is an asshole, bro. He should have scored a penalty. Like, I don't get, these cute ass penalties, bro. I don't like it. I don't like players that take penalties like that. Just take the ball and just put it in the back of the net. You know what I'm saying? That was
Yeah.
a poor penalty. And if I was the manager, bro, like after that game, I would be like going in at Vitinha. Honestly, you don't do those bullshit run up in a high state game in a semi-final. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
stupid, bro. Like I don't know where these people get this type of techniques or run up for these penalties. Like
But
absolutely stupid.
yeah, it's ludicrous. But also, like, I think Luis Enrique went in with the right substitutions at the right time, bringing in Ousmane Dembele at the 70th minute and Lucas Hernandez on the 74th. Like, they took off Barcola, they took off Kavisha. Like, it was more like defense oriented, and they got it right. Like, because I saw Hernandez really covering Nuno Mendes up really well, and he acted as a wing back in that transition. But yeah, I mean, PSG still did fall short in terms of they were found out a bit in the end, and it would have been a different tale altogether. The narrative would have changed altogether if Saka would have converted that opportunity. But again, football for me is a game of moments, right? It comes down to these narrow margins, so you can't really deny that fact that this was a tremendous fixture. To be honest, I enjoyed it. The second leg was more interesting than the first, but Inter versus Barca, both the legs, I think that was proper football for me.
Yeah, definitely. That Inter Barca game was good. But in terms of Arsenal, what they can fix moving forward, I just think that they need better players. To be honest, I don't think it's so much of a case where the team isn't good. I think in terms of how they play football, I think it's actual football. It's not like they're parking the bus or anything like that. But they definitely need more technical players and players of better quality. And I'm gonna have to call out KP, to be honest, because bro, I don't know how this man
Martinelli,
even.
Martinelli, he's on the
Yeah, I don't know how
Martinelli
this man even
bandwagon.
praises Martinelli, bro. Like, it's not like Saka that actually gets up. It's not like Saka that actually gets past players, and then Saka can come in on the inside, and he has that trademark of taking the shot on his on his left foot. Like that's his trademark, but he's so good at it. You know what I'm saying? But Saka is actually skilled to get past players. Like, bro, Martinelli doesn't get past defenders. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't come in on the inside. He doesn't create space. He doesn't get away from defenders to get into space to find a pass or take a shot. He doesn't do that. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like,
Yeah,
bro, you cannot play football against better teams expecting that you can only operate from one side of the pitch. It's not going to work like that, bro. You know?
yeah,
As bad as United is, they can be dynamic on the left hand side with the likes of Garnacho
true.
if he's having a good game, and you
That's a
can
good
also
point, by
have
the way. And I
Bruno
don't think
and
Achraf
Ahmad on that
Hakimi
right
was
hand
that
side.
hard to beat. You remember there were times like twice this happened twice in the first half where Martinelli actually he braced past Hakimi, but then Hakimi was able to recover
Yeah.
that sequence. Yeah, he recovered, and I was amazed. I was like, wow, that's how bad
When,
he is.
when
I
you look
mean,
at the likes of Bayern Munich, you have the Sanes of the world, you have the Olise on the right hand side. You have
yeah,
that dynamic Liverpool, Gakpo, Jota down the left hand side. You have Salah on that right hand side. City, the Bernardo Silva, the guy that they brought in from Girona, and then you have Grealish and Doku down that left hand side. So there's always that balance in terms of they can always switch it up in terms of the dynamic of when and where they want to attack. You know what I'm saying? Because they have
correct.
quality players. You know what I'm saying? Arsenal in the last 3 seasons, I think one of the main killers for them is that they keep on operating down that right hand side, and there's not enough dynamism and quality down that left hand side. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah,
Gabriel Martinelli is this. I'm not going to say he's a headless chicken, but he's not enough of a quality player to me, bro. Like he's not enough, bro. You know what I'm saying? And to me, he can never win the Prem operating just by going down one side. I mean, if you have a world class striker, fair enough, it's going to happen, but even if they have one, I don't think that's going to be the like be all and end all of like solving the problems.
correct. I agree, man. I think, yeah, but I mean, it's just a culmination of both teams not able to be that clinical tonight, right? It came down to that, like, but I don't think Martinelli in totality, like, he is up there anymore. He was at one point in time back in 2021, 22, but then after that injury, I think there was a competition with um, Smith Rowe, right? Emil Smith Rowe. I think after he sustained that injury, I think Martinelli's levels dropped. That's where I think Arsenal really need to enforce better talents to be competitive in those positions. You know, you can't really get away with just one player playing over there. And not everyone is going to be Mohamed Salah or Bukayo Saka. You know,
Yeah.
I think like Saka is operating on the same levels for Arsenal as Salah is, but still, like for the left winger, I mean, we have for every Luis Diaz, we have a Gakpo, right? But who can say that for Martinelli? You need better competition and better talent over there. And I think it's just also confidence for sure. I think I've seen him, his ball control hasn't been as good as it used to be. But I still think he loves generating a bit of momentum. He loves someone passing like Xhaka used to pass it down. And I think running on the ball and then staying static and then trying to create an opportunity of going behind the defender is there's a major difference in that. I think that's where Martinelli is really losing the game.
But you know,
Uh,
one thing that Martinelli doesn't have to his game, and he's definitely a fake Brazilian. He doesn't have that trickery to his game. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't
yeah,
have the quick feet. He doesn't have that skill to like, you know, he doesn't have that like a Doku or Savino or those guys or
yeah, he
Saka.
can't
You
he
know what
can't
I'm
really
saying?
dribble past defenders on
Yeah,
a
he
volume.
doesn't have it.
Yeah,
You know, you
in
have to
volume
have,
he can't really do that. Like not consistently, like the way Doku can, for sure. And yeah, you're
yeah,
right. You need quick feet for that and better ball control. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
Doku. Yeah, the only thing with Doku is I think his final deliveries are a problem. His output is a problem. But yeah, as a player, he's definitely up there.
Yeah, I think he'll get there though.
Yeah, I think he's 24, right? Yeah, I think we still have time.
Yeah, definitely. And this is his
Yeah,
first season on the Pep as well. So his first season, right?
yeah. No, this is the second season with
Second.
City.
Yeah.
But guys, it was lovely talking to you, man. Kesh, I was hoping that we had Arsenal fans on the podcast. I mean, it would have been even better. But nonetheless, I think we'll wait for that discussion to happen. But guys, do not forget to like, subscribe, and do leave a comment. Let us know what you feel about our opinions, and do not forget to subscribe. Yeah.